President Trump's order to deploy the National Guard to Portland, Oregon was blocked by a federal judge yesterday. Now Chicago, as well as the entire state of Illinois, are suing in hopes to avoid the same threat of troop deployment. Peter Haramboulis from ABC News gives us an overview.
After a judge prohibited Trump's takeover of the Oregon National Guard this weekend, the Trump administration responded by sending troops into Portland from neighboring California. Trump-appointed Judge Karen Immergut said in a late-night hearing on Sunday that move violated her earlier court order because Trump failed to justify sending in troops, and she expanded her ruling to prohibit the National Guard from any state from being deployed into the city. Peter Haramboulis, ABC News.
And this judge, Karen Immergut, is not just any judge. She's actually a Trump appointee. ABC News senior political correspondent Rachel Scott tells us more.
Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, issued a new, broader order prohibiting the administration from using federal control to send any state's National Guard into Oregon, and pressing the government's attorney, saying, quote, "You are an officer of the court. Do you believe that this is an appropriate way to deal with my order?"
So I'm looking at the order, Jason. It's a little unusual because it came out yesterday. It came out Sunday. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the judge can issue orders anytime she wants, but it's a very, very short, and she styles it second temporary restraining order. So she had issued a restraining order, I don't know, some time ago. It looks like it doesn't say when it was exactly. And then, it was back in about a month or so ago. The defendants, that is President Trump, Pete Hegseth, and Kristi Noem from Department of Homeland Security, issued an appeal and said, hey, you're staying us. You're stopping us from doing what we have the right to do. The judge says, no, I'm going to block it again. So she issued a second temporary restraining order. And now Chicago's saying, hey, we want in too. We want to do the same thing.
Well, it's so interesting how quickly this is happening. And remember, this comes right after this federal judge in Oregon blocked a similar deployment there in Portland. I think there was a temporary restraining order there.
Right.
So as you were just describing, you talk about what's happening. The reactions are very quick. This is like you mentioned too. You don't see this happening this quickly. The response, it kind of shows the heightened level of tension that's happening right there between the federal and the state level, particularly when it comes to this issue. An action is taken, a corresponding court action taken almost immediately.
Yeah, and of course it started in California, and they're part of this matter as well. But it's one thing when you deploy federal troops to the District of Columbia, because let's face it, it's not an independent jurisdiction. And so it's overseen by the federal government. But when you start bringing troops to California, to Oregon, and to Illinois, those states go, wait a minute, we've got it covered here. And I don't know if you've been watching any social media, but the people in Portland, Oregon are posting pictures of big farmers markets and saying, boy, we're really struggling here. And the night out on the town, and it's beautiful, and the nightlife is great. Boy, we really need federal troops here. I mean, Portland, Oregon was probably not the best target for the administration to go after, and especially because there doesn't seem to be a problem. You don't think of Portland, Oregon as crime central USA.
You really don't. The farmers market is probably a perfect example. In fact, I was even looking up, because usually what you have is these predicate conditions.
Right.
What would you need typically? And these are things like rebellion, insurrection, the civil authorities are not able to maintain the peace in some way. And I think that's what they're trying to show is none of these conditions maybe necessarily exist. I think that was the idea coming out of Oregon, and certainly that's what we're talking about in Chicago and Illinois.
Right. We think of the National Guard as being federal troops, and I guess they are, but we've learned now that they're really under the state's auspices, and the state calls them, not necessarily the federal government. So it's been unusual here that Trump is telling California, your National Guard is going to be called to your state, and of course, Gavin Newsom's a different animal altogether. He's like, you're not the boss of me. You don't tell me what I do with my National Guard. But it's now gone into Oregon. It's gone to Illinois. Like I said, it started in D.C., which is different. But I mean, the Trump administration is getting slapped down every time they try this.
Well, they have, and what you just described is what's happening, not just in the examples we have, but having worked with the governors myself, they consider this National Guard as someone This is a Utah National Guard. This is a group designed to help us.
Right.
And governors, I think, on all sides of the aisle would look at one of these efforts, and they will immediately feel like they have something to say about it. I think that's why you see these governors mobilizing so quickly.
You wonder, Jason, how this is playing in the court of public opinion when the administration comes in on the one hand and says, your city is crime-ridden. It's time we do something about it, and we're going to take a giant step. We're going to deploy federal troops, and the city's saying, we or the state or both is saying, we've got this. Crime is bad, but we're dealing with it, and so. On the one hand, I think some citizens would go, well, hey, if things are really bad in Chicago or D.C., maybe we should do something. On the other hand, you look at Los Angeles, Portland, even Chicago and D.C., and say, well, they're getting better. I mean, these are cities whose crime rates are actually going down. So the timing of it's not great, but maybe the citizens feel like, hey, maybe we should send somebody in and do something about the crime problem. I don't know that we're getting that.
Well, I wonder, because mostly what's happening right now is we're talking about it through a political lens,
right? Unfortunately,
so,
right.
so that's kind of just the world we live in right now, which is interesting. If you and I have talked to people in Washington D.C. that have told me with the guard there, and I've been there recently. I know you get there a lot, Greg, too. But I was there recently, and you did see members of the guard on corners. And I asked people who live there, and some would say, "Wow, I've seen. I'm walking around at night when I didn't used to walk around at night." Of course, the others are saying that's exactly what they didn't want to see. So you're looking at your appropriate comments, I think, about crime, but we start talking about it through a political lens. It changes the whole analysis.
And you look at these National Guardsmen and women who have served their country, want to serve their country, but never expect to be deployed to their own city or to a city, you know what I mean? To a U.S. city to do something like that. That wasn't in there. I mean, if you're setting up sandbags or getting something done or, helping, engineer some bridge or something, that's one thing. But, policing your own, I wonder how these men and women feel doing that. I mean, that's not something they signed up for.
Well, it certainly isn't. I think after all of this is done, we see what happens with these court cases. We're going to start getting a little commentary from people, not just who are keeping us safe, but also that are saying whether or not they're being mobilized for the appropriate reasons or not, because you're exactly right. We've seen natural disasters in the state of Utah, and we see our National Guard step in and do an amazing job. This is a whole different ask.
So the state of Oregon and the city of Portland and the state of California have been granted a temporary restraining order restraining the federal government from deploying troops in those regions. The state of Illinois and the city of Chicago are saying, hey, we want in on this. They're going to file their own lawsuits here shortly, and they've got a template. I mean, that always makes your job a little easy as an attorney when somebody's already done the work for you and you have a. But of course, federal judges from one state don't necessarily bind another. We've seen that.
Yeah, that's right.
And they'll look at this on a state by state basis. Ultimately, it's either going to be some sort of. Well, I don't see this as going to a class action, but ultimately, I think the Supreme Court or the appeals courts are going to have to weigh in on this and decide whether or not and to what extent the federal government can deploy troops.
Yeah, I think that's the heart of the question. And what goes along with that, certainly a point, is at what point do you have an appropriate and legitimate federal response, and when does it become political?
Yeah, and when does it get to the United States Supreme Court, which, by the way, is entering their October session, and they're slated to face some serious decisions. SCOTUS. I always want to say SCOTUS. SCOTUS blogs, Kelsey Dallas will join us to talk about what's on the docket. That's coming up next, streaming live at KSL NewsRadio.com and on the app for KSL News Radio, sponsored by At Your Service Pros.